The number of fucking people that I've had tell me, yeah, I get my blood work done. But then you find out, well, I always make sure it's, like 8 weeks after the meet, I go off all the shit. I really reduce all the shit. I start eating really well. It's like they're fucking gaming their blood work.
And it's like I'm going to the dentist and I'm going to brush really hard.
Yeah. And then it's like, look at how great my blood work was. I'm like, well, I want to see what it looked like, you fucking idiot.
At the worst.
2 weeks before the meet. Let me see what you do. 2 meets a year. So fucking half your year, it's probably looking like shit, but you don't even look at that. So I roll my eyes when I hear the blood work one because I'm like, yeah, okay.
Because you don't really know, like if you're not going to get it when things are bad, you can't just like put your head in the sand and be like, no, this is fine. Yeah. Everything's fine. You don't know how close you've come to bad shit.
Well, then they have their bro read it.
Yeah,
hey man, what do you think about this? And it's just,
this is normal,
this
right?
is supposed to be high.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're athletes. That's why that's high.
Yes, exactly.
I've talked to you about blood work quite a bit, and you have such a track record of like getting blood work so regularly that you have years and years history of your blood work. And I think that's such a smart thing to do is like every time you get it, keep tabs on it so you can compare and contrast because those are all just data points, right? Yeah. If you go once a year, that's once a year for one snapshot during who knows what the fuck you were doing. That may be complete, like you had said, if your game in the system is like, I'm going 8 weeks, this paleo, walking 10 miles a day, you know what I mean? All this bullshit. And then you're just going back to training like an asshole and you don't know what's going on in your body during that time, right? Like it's so unrealistic and kind of disingenuous to do that, to have all of those data points. I mean, we're talking years and years for you.
I mean, when I first came to Westside, it's when I hooked up with Dr. Serrano and I hated him. I did. I hated it. Yeah. But I mean, I've always known that I need to see a doctor at least once a year. Yeah. He insisted on the blood work and it wasn't great, during those competitive, and it was only once a year and I fucking hated him. I didn't like what he was saying. I was probably just like every other meathead, like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But then progressively over years, it just, you start validating more shit. Like, okay, this is just a little off. That's not that bad. All right. Oh, it's just borderline. It's not that bad. It's just a little over borderline. We can get it back, and then, having him, that's why I didn't like him, because he's on my shit, from the very beginning. And then it's like, okay, now this is fucked up. And let me tell you exactly why. So then you make the changes and you dial that all back. And then once I retired, then it was, okay, there's some things in here we need to really fucking correct. Yeah. That, because my final push, I pushed it harder than any of the other time. So it was going to fuck some of those things up even more. So then it was a matter of, okay, how do we get all this back to normal? And I had a normal, kind of, throughout those years. IV therapy, chelation therapy, vitamin every 2 weeks for 3 fucking years. All this just to kind of get it where it needed to be. And then it's been no less than 2 times a year, probably an average of 4. Oh, so quarterly. Yeah. Since 2005.
That's a lot of fucking data points.
Yes, because that's when I see them. And there's a lot of things that we're trying to correct. And then it got to a point where there weren't things that were necessarily fucked up because of that. They're just things that, vitamin D was very low. So then and it was very, very stubborn to get back up. So those things, and then there would be fluctuations in coenzyme Q12 and the Bs, the hemoglobin's genetically high for me. And so now I have my father's blood work and then my blood work and then where it was really bad and then where's my norm and then how's that fall. And where this gets to validate what I think you're trying to say is there's a norm in there, right? And so for me, the hemoglobin is, like I said, it's on the higher side. It's not borderline, but it's on the higher side. So when I would see a doctor that's not, Eric, they would always say, well, it's because you take testosterone replacement therapy. I said, well, my testosterone numbers here is only 325 or it's only 500 or whatever it's going to be. Well, it's because you're taking the testosterone.
Of course.
Okay. Right. So keep in mind, I got fucking quarterly blood results for a decade. So then this is why when I go to see a new doctor, I'm like fucking Roadhouse, man. What was the dude's name in Roadhouse? The fucking bouncer guy, Patrick Swayze, right? Okay. I carry my medical records for this fucking reason. And so they'll say that, and I'll say, well, that's an interesting thing. Let me show you. Every time my testosterone was in the 900, 1,000 range, my hemoglobin was low.
Right.
14, 15, comparatively low for me. But look when it was down. Here, when it was 165 and 300, the hemoglobin was fucking 19. Yeah. So what you're saying, I need to take more shit. Yeah. Because
all right, because you have that playbook for you.
Yeah. So and trust me, once you get to that level, most doctors are not assholes. I mean, once you get that, they want to help you. That's why they're doctors. And once you get there, then like, oh, okay, cool. Now we can take this off of the table. Now we know it. Now let's look and see what this really is. Because is this where it should be? Is it elevated because of something? And that's why having that routine blood work, really, really helps, because Eric is my general practitioner in internal medicine. He's my family doctor, whatever you want to call that. There's issues when you need to see a specialist, and you're going to see a specialist. They're going to want their own labs. They're going to want the so they're going to have all these other. They don't have your medical history. No, I mean, they'll act like they review your medical history, but they really don't. And very rarely are they going to call your family doctor. Now, situations like this opens that door to be able to say, okay, here's what this is, here's what that is, and it helps moving forward. Because you have to be proactive on these things, especially if you have the history that I have. I know I'm going to pay. You see what I'm saying? I know I'm going to pay. Well, what can I do to reload or to reduce that?
Well, cost? That diligence just automatically, so you have that information, you have that data, increases your level of care, whoever you go to now, because now you have the objective data from years and years and years, and be like, here, look at this. And now they can do their job better, the specialist or whoever it may be. If it's somebody besides Serrano, it's like now they can see and and actually connect real dots, not just like these systematized general numbers based on population, based on age, based on right. It's like, no, we're going to N equals 1 in this situation, right? So this test is now going to be a test for you as opposed to the norms.
Well, it keeps me accountable as well.
Right.
To where, I'm not on a strict diet, obviously. Everything's in moderation. But
even moderation. Moderation.
So I know, in February, I'm going to get my blood work again. And so I know what my risk factors are. I know what that has to mean, and I don't have to rely on my body weight, my BMI, my body fat, all this other general crap that sometimes that's all people have to go by. I rely on what all this is. And yes, my body weight does influence this, so I know where that threshold is. And then I also know each year moving forward, it probably needs to come down a little bit as well, because it's going to become more of that risk factor, but doesn't guarantee a fucking thing. It just makes you more aware of what your health markers are. And the reason I say that is John was exactly like this. This is where I learned all this from.
Sure.
He still passed.
Right.
So nothing guarantees anything, but it is going to guarantee and lower the risk factors, obviously, because you're going to be accountable for those. And it's going to keep you more accountable. Because it's hard to stay accountable. You don't want to use metrics like, well, here's what my lean body mass is, especially if you're on that back end. That's going to go down every year as you get older.
Yep.
Once you get over a certain age, in my mid 50s, I can keep fighting to try to keep what I have, but I'm not going to put on 30 pounds of lean body mass.
Right.
Nor do I want to. And so there's all that as well.
And I think it's one of those things too, is if you're starting to use those norms, the general data later in your career or later in life, those norms don't have anything to do with like we had talked about earlier, is the potential damage or risk factors you put your body through for the first 55 years of your life, right? Like like those norms may be norm for most people most of the time, but at the same time, it's like that's not you. Right?
I mean, it's fucked up though, because it's like all the max effort exercises I used to be obsessive about. It's like I need to keep this one in this range and this one in this range. Now it's like that's my hemoglobin, that's my fucking vitamin D, that's my cholesterol, that's this. But
it's one of those things that I think most people that I've seen or talked to, it's like, I get blood work once a year, cool. But it's like, but you don't know what that means. You don't know what it means long term. You don't know what it means for you from season to season. I mean, we periodize everything in training. Like you had said, you'll focus in on make sure my floor press is here so that this is here. But it's like we don't periodize the type of health habits that you have throughout the year. You were talking to me about supplements and like vitamin D and like all this stuff. And you sent me this list. You cycle different nutrients and supplements for different parts of the year based on, you know, just the information that you have. And it's like, holy shit. Like this can be as nuanced as anybody wants to make it based on the information that they have. And you have all that information for you. So you know what works for you. You have that playbook. And I think most people are lazy with their health. It's like, I'll just hammer a pizza and show up hungover and that'll be great. And I'll do that for 20 years. And, you know, nobody really focuses on this shit until something bad happens. Right?
Well, they should before.
Absolutely.
I won't say that I focused the same as what I do now, but I had it. But the other thing that needs to be understood with blood work is that's what your metrics were for the time that blood was pulled.
Exactly.
Right? Later that day, it could be different. You could be dehydrated. There's a lot of factors that play into that. Some things are going to be a little bit more stable than some other things. Was it fasted? Was it not fasted? There's a lot.
While you're recovering from training, like the creatinine, right?
Yes,
like when the muscle damage is like if you had a hard training session the day before, it's going to fuck up your numbers.
Even more so than that. I mean, I will not train. I won't train at all for 4 or 5 days before, and I won't train hard for at least a week before, because that's my standard before the blood's done.
Yep.
You know, so I can pull back on the training 4 times a year, you know, to be able to make sure when my blood work's done, it's done relatively in the same time, you know, the same fasted state, the same recovered state for that reason.
Yeah, I had like a scare with like my kidneys because I went to an appointment with the doctor and got blood work while I was water loading. So I was like, they're like, oh, it looks like your kidneys are getting overworked. It's like, yeah, I would say so because I'm on gallon 3 for the day, you know? So like even my body weight, they're like, wow, your body weight's way higher than it was. I was like, yeah, I'm water loading. Like I didn't think about it, but it caused all these red flags. Then when after the contest and after nationals, I got my blood work again and like, oh, you're fine. Fuck. Like that was a lot of stress. It was undue stress because I should have been like, oh, fuck, like, let me just reschedule this for a couple weeks out, or even before I started water loading, have that shit. But that was an extreme example of the medical field doesn't really know or follow the shit that we do in the gym.
Yes.
Right?
And yes, they don't. And on the flip side of that is I have to let, you know, Eric know that I did take the time off.
Yeah.
Right. Because he's going to know that the liver enzymes will be skewed if I just trained, and he will just assume, because I've trained my whole life, that I've still been training normally.
Right.
So I have to say, look, I've not done anything for a week. So now if he sees anything skewed with that, it's a different number to him than otherwise. So that's just basic communication.
Absolutely.
But normally, we'll just leave it at that. I mean, I could go on forever about this, but I'm not a doctor, so
sure.
There would be more interesting conversation to have, you know, a doctor on the podcast that knows all this stuff.
That would be cool if we had Serrano out here.
Yes.
That'd be good. But yeah, no, I think the bottom line is have more information than less, you know, and
it's not just blood work either. So when I'm talking about this level here, there's calcium scores, there's heart scans, there's all kinds of other things that should be done as markers as well, especially as you're getting older. So blood work it's actually kind of a shitty metric. You know, there's other metrics that as you get older, a good doctor will know what tests that you should have based upon your own history, and get them. Don't, you know, not get those. It's just stupid.
Absolutely. Just from my own experiences, like when I was weighing 220, my blood work was different than when I was 198. Like just based on body weight alone. Like it was just eye-opening to see. And I've been collecting my blood work as well, just because I have family history of all sorts of crazy shit. And, you know, so it's just important to realize that when it comes to health markers, it's like details do matter. Don't just be like, oh, my doctor's an asshole. They don't get it. I train so hard, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, open up a conversation with them. Maybe find a different doctor who knows about it, or educate them, who advocate for yourself, I guess I should say.
And maybe they're not going to be on the same page. I mean,
right.
Eric and I were not on the same page for a long time.
Right.
But I was smart enough to keep going, and then, you know, he stuck with me long enough knowing that at some point in time, this fucking idiot, you know, is going to listen to what I'm going to say.
Yeah, absolutely.